All right, I got a kind of like crazy Batman camera angle going here. I really need some kind of backdrop. I hate the cheap blurring ones. They just look terrible. Maybe if I can just hold my head in perfectly. This is harder to do than you imagine. Well, now it just looks like I have an antenna coming out of my head. Um, Got an extra pillow under here. Hopefully, I'll be a little more comfortable. I'm gonna try to tackle four, maybe five little songlets, and a couple of these are maybe even of a subcategory. They're not even songlets; they're little bass ideas. I seem to have this tendency towards doing melody in the bass. I've noticed this in my playing. I've gone away from all the finger complexity and pulling the melodies out there. I think, it's a struggle with the trying to break out of the like temporal lockstepness, which you're going to tend to get in very simple songs where the melody changes very strictly follow the chord changes. And as I understand that, the basic idea there is you would look at a phrase or a bar or whatever logical chunk of the flow of the music suggests that it's an isolated element, and you can look at the melody notes, and then the idea would be to play a chord that has as many of those notes in it as possible, so that the melody line reflects the chord progression, which gives you harmony rather than disharmony, right? But of course, part of what's interesting in music is pushing away from that, mathematical, rule-bound way, that we initiated in the medieval period as they start to canonize musical notation. Music was very rule bound at that time, and of course, one of the things that happens in the modern period and really explodes with popular music is this notion of music only in the hands of the elite, and then the specially trained gets turned on its head. But anyways, I don't want to get off topic here. So, I'm trying to be topical. I'm trying to be revolutionary. I'm trying to promote my work. I'm trying to provide value. I want to have conversations with people online. I want to, find the common codes for new ways of living, because the longer we wait to get out of this going off a cliff that we're doing, the worse the outcomes for everybody. This is just should be so obvious, and I just see all these endless promises of these techno hopes to solve our problems of just insane behavior, insane, pointlessly consumptive, destructive, restless, brainwashed behavior, and it's no wonder. I mean, I'm terrified to find like we're racing back to like a feudalism of stupidity again. People are no longer engaging in the arts positively. I mean, unless they're some famous celebrity, but it just seems more and more people don't read anymore, don't want to learn anything anymore. Like, what is it? Skincare routines, and I'm just shocked by this wallowing in our worst animal tendencies. And so, of course, these people think we're going to Mars. We're not going to Mars. In a couple of generations, we may lose massive numbers of fisheries because we're altering the oceans at a rate and a scale that is not conducive to ongoing complex animal life in the seas. And you know, we're causing problems at every level, and it's all from, again, this wasteful capitalist system we don't want to confront. And this is all we seem to be able to do, this rallying cry. The only way up is but GDP, but of course the more and more of that money is just filtering directly into the hands of billionaires who don't care. That they know we're destroying the planet, and they have plans of their own that don't involve you getting through this. And it ain't going to Mars. Like, this is ridiculous. And this thing with these fusion reactors, these things are not manageable solutions. You know, so they've got one running for 22 minutes. It's still not producing a surplus of power. You're looking at these machines costing trillions of dollars to make, and as I understand it, the renewable sources that we are migrating towards, unfortunately, they're not replacing fossil fuels. So this is why everything is piling on more. But we have to have this awakening in people. This isn't about condemning science. It's about understanding science is representationally neutral in terms of a value proposition. There's no such thing as good and bad knowledge to a scientist. There's facts and there's falsehoods. You know, this is in the empiricist tendency. This is the motivation that's being undone and unwound and thrown away in the West, is to not let the dictates of small-minded power and conditioning and other bullshit driven by ignorance and superstition and us falling into these primate taboos because we never confront the real world. So we don't understand the technologies. So we don't understand that this is all a pipe dream. We're not going to Mars. Not in 2050. It's just not going to happen. This is all ass backwards. We are not fit to leave this planet if we can't sustain ourselves on this planet through the more measured and wise use of technology and get out of all this hyperbolic bullshit. AI is just going to enslave and impoverish more of us because, again, it's the same problem with the green energy. Nobody's made a plan for how all these people who lose their jobs and won't be retrained, because retrained to what? Those jobs are supposedly going to be taken over. I mean, never mind the fact that AI is basically a sociopath, so you're just increasing. Now you have artificial sociopaths running everything alongside the regular flesh and bone sociopaths. So this idea that these technical, like, the only thing that has not occurred to anybody is that we need to learn to live with less, share more, and completely eliminate waste. Because right now I would say that over 50% of energy, water, everything that we produce that's valuable, it's just being wasted because everybody has just been looking to extract endless profit from, as everything became a profit center because it was going to trickle down. No, it doesn't trickle down. Profit only trickles up. It never trickles down. It's absurd that people keep following. Well, why? Because they don't read. They don't know anything about history. They think we're going to Mars. So these problems of this just acceleration towards ignorance and just the shocking numbers I'm seeing in the younger generation and their ability to learn basic shit, and then they're going to get to inherit a world that they won't understand how it works properly, because this world runs on math and science. But worse than that, they won't be able to deal with the chaos because they'll lack the basic skills of rational problem solving as a consequence of this hyper industrialization and hyper greed, and it's just insanity. It's the thing we need to understand is our civilization is in peril, and if we continue on this path of more, everybody is going to bay, and it's just the whole world will be authoritarian, and I don't think anybody is going to benefit in that world in the short or long run. So again, first I'm going to do these two little bass featured ones, see if I can get them right, and then why I like that, whether they're interesting musically, theory, rhythmically, whatever. But here's the first one. Here we go. So, I mean, I could bore you with this because we're starting at the root here in the Aeolian A minor, and then it goes from 4th, 7th, and then we're up to the octave, and then all I'm doing is just moving the bass note and then punching that up, so you get this lockstep. But what ultimately makes it interesting is when you break out of the diachronic again. So, and where am I getting up to there? What am I, on a 9th or 10th? Oh, I just spit some not asparagus, Brussels sprouts. I just had my Brussels sprout meal. And then that's the augmented note, flattened 5th, sharpened 4th, depending on the contents. And that's very common in modified blues scales, where you're typically adding in flattened notes to create so you get those little very bluesy sounding. So, this is just a little piece that came up, and like all of these things that they stick in my head, I keep practicing them, and I've just gotten to the point where, again, I'm probably got 18, 15 more of these to do. I'm knocking off a few today. And well, I don't know why I'm all wheezy. But here's another little one. Whoops. So again, interesting. I really like that one. I think if I had some people to work with, we could very quickly turn that into an interesting jam, because you can sort of see, like I said, I've always been aiming to chords over notes, notes over chords. The idea of in every little box here, all of music is basically contained within one of those boxes. So being able to orient yourself to the key, to the scales you might be using in those contexts, which is really the main job of learning and mastering the guitar. The other side of it is, what your creative impulse does with it. And maybe I don't have the ambition. I'm driven in an unhealthy way, obsessive about improvement. But of course I can't enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm a nervous performer. And this wheeziness is just driving me nuts now. It's like it's a whistle stuck in my throat. So anyways, like that's a little theme. And then it's almost like they're separate there, because I don't have the skill. Maybe somebody does to do both of those things at the same time. But I think they could be played at the same time. So this, I think they could be played on top of one another. So this is the interesting part of when I play that piece. It sounds like there could be other things happening. So I got, I used to have some other little licks and things like that. You start doing a project like this, and you start remembering songs that you had mastered and forgotten for various reasons. This is really goddamn annoying here. I need bottle brush. I don't know why I got something stuck in the back of my throat, like a wheezing horse on the way to the glue factory. All right. So now I'm going to do a more full songlet. Those are sub-songlets, basslets. This is another really early one, and this came right out of practicing the minor harmonic, which sounds like this. And it was a reaction to the weak resolve from the dominant 7 back to the octave in the straight minor, the Aeolian minor. You know, it's a weak resolve. What you like is that half step resolve. So the minor melodic is another scale where they attempt to fix that problem. I won't talk about here, but the minor harmonic, which is that Middle Eastern sound, has that step and a half gap between the 6th and then to the major 7th. So, and then you build different chords on this, and you'll get a lot of diminished chords, augmented chords, and different. And the other thing that I've noticed is when you play in the original 7 modes, Ionian and those, each chord you build on a note in the scale, it'll just be of one character. This is where I should know this, not the tonality, but minor, major, augmented. But as you get into these modified scales that are less symmetric, then for a given note, there might be a minor chord and an augmented chord that you could play. So you get that Middle Eastern sound from the introduction of the dissonance because of altering the scale. So this, I was practicing the minor melodic and the jazz minor, which are related, and then the minor harmonic, 5 or 6, 7 years after. Early on, I spent a lot of time working on scales and modes for that part of the music theory. So this is another very old songlet. Whoops. Well, that's pretty good. So, you can see all these pieces have these sort of little bass melodies that drive are interspersed between the chord progressions. And again, like a lot of my songs, they're very technically robotic, I guess. And of course, I don't seem to have the drive or inclination to add a lot of complexity to do recording and all that. I would rather do that with a group of people. So once again, if any of my little songlets seem interesting to you, I'd be willing to record tighter versions of them so that we can share and build remotely a song on that basis, just by adding and removing melody lines. Make decisions about how to add structure to the song, intro, just make it like a little pop instrumental thing. And I mean, the example I gave you before is BoJack Horseman, the wonderful theme song for that is, I believe, the writer or somebody associated with the show his uncle, I think, played the sax, and they just started recording and sending back and forth little melodic bits, and in the end they ended up coming up with that thing. So There was another thing that I wanted to in the Zen thing, things that you might not think about as ways to optimize your improvement as a guitarist. So I'm almost 60. I'm really worried that I'm peaking and I have brain injury caused dementia coming. Like, I'm actually very scared about this, and there's no, I can't get diagnosis, healthcare support. It's so, I don't feel young at 60, and I don't feel happy about being forced to live out the most vulnerable time of my life with all of these worries and health problems without any reliable and dignified income. And while fucking Hitler is taking over the States and will probably take over Canada, like, I just don't think people want to really face this reality either, how bad these things are heading. But when you start early on, it's very frustrating unless you've been gifted with the good wiring, say, because I think that's all it is. Some people just, they develop with more fine motor control skill. Who knows how that gets triggered or not. Most of us, when we start to play an instrument, we're really going to struggle with the mechanical parts of it, because it's like when you have a child, you have to teach the child everything. Well, we don't have a genetic encoding for rendering guitars. It just would never work that way. The general intelligence that we have transcended with language and symbolic language allows us to encode that stuff in all these institutions by which music is composed, recorded, and disseminated. So there's just no way you got to lay hands on. But of course, you're going to have these leaps. And I'm not just talking about these linear improvements. So maybe this is the whole thing between gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. I think there's an analogy that both of these things are true. You can see improvement in the moment, but you can also see that improvement gets stuck. Like, so what I want to talk about here is these leaps you take. And these leaps are like that thing where you're trying to solve a problem, you're up all night, you're making no progress, you're getting into a weird state, and you finally crash out, and then you just forget about it. The next day you get up and you're walking, you forgot about last night, and bam, the idea pops into your head. Well, I think you're constantly reaching these levels where you're just, everything you're doing gets done a little bit better. Like, you're always building a model of yourself playing the guitar. And that model has good and bad things. This is why it's important to play in tune, play in time. Like, I never did the metronome thing, but I always practiced to recorded songs. So those songs are recorded to metronomes. And then that was a thing I find. A lot of times now when I play, I just start tapping. So, this is these good habits mean that your model is not being built with all these problematic danglers. Such as you see me struggling in songs when I'm thinking too much or I'm thinking about the wrong thing, and then you get in that spiral of representation as opposed to just rendering in that more immediate non-conscious way. So I had assumed that I had stopped making those leaps, but you may have noticed I've gotten a little bit better and less anxious doing these pieces. I don't know why, but I'm sure I took another leap. So I just think my overall facility, even hitting 60, I'm a better guitar player than I was last week, and it just happens all at once. And a lot of time the sign is you're really working hard or you're good in your lessons, and then you're struggling. And so a lot of times people get frustrated and they want to give up. And of course, maybe you are. I tried to be a comic book artist, and for 2 years I worked at it, and I just was getting nowhere and just realized it really wasn't for me. But the guitar has never stopped for me, even though I am not accomplishing what I'd hoped to in the bigger scope. But I can't control what's happened in my life. all the opportunities to do this have been taken away. People don't have money. People aren't going out anymore, and whatever it is people are doing, it's not reading, writing, and mastering things. It's just pointless consuming and whatever. I don't know, what is it that people are doing. I fill my days with reading and exercise and cleaning and strategizing, and I want to do another one of my videos, but I'm really kind of stuck and unmotivated. Yet, if you persist, and especially if you feel like you're getting into these, you're not making progress, sometimes just take a step back. Take a day off the hard practice. I've been trying to shift into the really complicated part of what's called chordal soloing, and in a jazz tradition, which means a lot more varied and unusual modes and modifications of scales, and the amount of memory work compared to, say, just using the basic Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian modes, which is a lot easier because the pattern is the same across all of those modes. But when you start getting into weird modes, like for the minor harmonic, the modes of that are a lot harder to make that shift in your brain. So that's where I'm at, and I was feeling some resistance, and sometimes I just don't do my practice for days. So sometimes what doesn't seem like progress is something else is going on. So if I can continue 20 years in, 60 years old, probably in the early stages of dementia, certainly not doing well in the greater scheme of things, but because I play this thing and I try to play it every day, and I try to, even when I fall off, get back into my discipline, I'm continuing to make those improvements. So the other thing I wanted to mention about this is about this Zen thing. And so, I've said, never stop a song, even if you flub it. This is a bad habit, because if you keep stopping a song in that reactive way, that's what you're training your brain to think the song is. And that's just why if you have a flub, let the song go. Well, there's another side of this. So if I'm working on a song or a piece and where I've struggled with a fingering, and then I get into a good mode and I do it, and I realize it, I say, record that one, right? I don't know how this would work, but I think we can activate this. Is sort of memory is a form of perception, and it's not in your brain, it's in the block universe. Your memories are out there. You orient yourself in this space-time, in your space-time worm, to those events. So the more you link together in however the brain does this to learn a song or to learn a technique, the more you put those intentions on those moments where you've executed well, to say, keep that brain, throw that away. So sometimes I'll have a doobie and I go to practice a song, and of course at the start, it just derails your ability to play a remembered song. You get two bars in and you forget what song you're playing. So, sometimes I do that, and I'm like, I'll try again. And then I get to the same part and I get stuck. And so now I'm going, holy crap, I'm unlearning this song. So I do the opposite thing there. I go, forget about it. So if you're working on something and it's not going well, tell your brain at the end, if you can't make progress, we don't need to keep that, but you can work on it in the background. But when you play something and you really get it right, and it's in that moment of practice, sometimes just go, yes, that's it, brain, and just stop right there, because that you want, that's that whole thing of picking up a needle in a bad groove in your mind and putting it in a good groove. I mean, it's easy to talk about these things as if we should all be able to effortlessly overcome just through willpower, our mind powers, but I don't think it works in that direct way, and that's what I'm trying to convey. There is a way of putting intentions out, manifestation if you want, but it's not unlimited. Don't get into the power god shit. And it's about you have to have a kind of innocence in asking. You recognize the moment, you touch it with the intention, and then you back out. I think we get into trouble when you know, like you buy a lottery ticket. This one's the winner. But then if you keep thinking about winning, is your intention working against that outcome? Like, what would be the magic if it were possible to go and, hey, that's a winning ticket, and just know it and scratch it such that you were manifesting that. I mean, again, a lot of I don't want to start a cult. I don't think we have power here, but we certainly can marshal aspects of our development along projects such as this. And it's a shame to see that people are turning away from these harder and more value. You know, it's not just destroying the value for those who won't make a commitment to learn and grow anymore, to overcome their weaknesses, and then it devalues the people like me who have done that, and I look around and no one values the things that I can do, because A, they can't do it, so it's a threat to their esteem that I can do it at all, and B, they can't understand it, and so it's a threat to their esteem that I understand things that I think are easy to understand, and they won't even make that minimal effort. So is this the world we want in the future? I didn't do the other Songlet, you know. I'm losing love for doing these videos, but you know, I'm a stickler. I'm too hard on myself. I'm self-deprecating. I don't know how else. This is how I was raised. I'm not all of a sudden just going to become a magically healthy and positive person. I'm deeply grooved into my dysfunction, and it's you just can't. I've been put through too much trauma since the pandemic to ever think that anything but staying out of the fucking way of the class civilization is all I can really hope for here. So the beat went on, and it ends in a rambling mess. We'll see what the point of this was when it all goes away, I guess, and then we'll all get the answers that we're seeking.